So if you go back 10 or 15 years, these tents were everywhere. Now, whether that be on a campsite or up on the fells, you always saw a Vango Banshee. But that's not the case anymore. There's lots of other tents there instead. So what happened to the old Banshee? Vango have been making tents for about 60 years now. And probably the most famous and classic of the tents was the Force 10. And they still make that today. And that's been used on a couple of assaults on Everest. Chris Bonington, I think, took it in 72 and 1975. And those tents have stood the test of time. But the most popular tent that Vango have ever made by volume, anyway, by sales, is this thing, the Vango Banshee. Whether that be the 200 or the 300 model. The 200 is definitely not a two-person tent. I'll show you inside in a minute. But if you're going with two people, you want the 300 version. So I had a look online to try and find out when the first ever Vango Banshees were made. And there's not a lot of info, pre-2010 anyway. And the earliest documentation I could find was 2007 to 2009 pitching instructions. And so I guessed at 2007, but yeah, I contacted Vango and asked them, and they said the first model was the camping season of 2006 to 2007. So I was about right. And the original model was like the 300 Vango that I've got. So the poles it was an inner pitch first. This is 2012, and it's much better. Since then, they've been an outer pitch first, or outer and inner at the same time. So it's much easier for our UK conditions when it's raining. So over the years, there's been a number of different iterations of this tent. They've made little tweaks here and there. So this little flap that you've got on the side, that's not there anymore. They've got more of these kind of things, little wire things over the door for ventilation, which is better. I think that some of the newer models have got two doors, although I've not had one of the newer Vango Banshees. I only bought this one, was it last year? Yeah, this was the tent that I should have bought when I bought my first backpacking tent. It was the one that I wanted. It was 2012 when I was thinking about getting it, and I wanted the one with the red poles. Yeah, there was a Banshee 300 came up on eBay or something like that for 50 quid, and I bought that instead. And I never really used it because it was a bit too big and bulky. And then I got the Vango Zenith 200 instead, which is similar sort of style to this tent. So when I first started thinking about getting into camping and backpacking, this was the tent that everybody recommended. It was classed as bomb-proof, which no tent's bomb-proof as we know, but for the price as well, I think you could get this for about £60-70 when it was on offer at the time. And so price to weight, which is around 2 kilos, and it is pretty storm worthy. I'm not going to say it's going to take 60-mile-an-hour winds and stuff, because it probably won't. But if you pitch it in a good location and be sensible about it, you can get away with some nasty conditions anyway. And it was also the tent that was recommended for the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, so there was loads of teenagers and stuff that were hiking across the Peak District or the Lake District, Dartmoor, with one of these strapped to the back of their Vango backpack. You always see them with the bright orange waterproof covers on, and I never did any of that when I was a kid, and I feel like I missed out now. I'm a bit of a late bloomer with that kind of thing. But yeah, it was recommended for the DFE. Everybody in the wild camping community, which was a lot smaller then. This was before the days of social media really kicking off. There wasn't thousands of YouTubers putting videos on about camping. There wasn't wild camping UK groups with hundreds of thousands of people on them on Facebook. It was usually little forums and things like that. And this is what everybody said that you needed. But over the years, things seem to have changed quite a bit. Not so many people are recommending the Banshee anymore. It seems to be a bit of a forgotten hero, because it still does the same thing as it did 20 years ago when it was made. The new sort of budget tent, it's got the iconic status, we'll call it, is the OEX Fox 1 and 2. Similar sort of style, 2 poles. One's a little bit higher, one's a bit lower, like this one. Still basically a coffin tent, but you can pick them up sometimes for about £60, which is what the Vango Banshee was at the time, if you're going back 15-20 years. So if you don't know, OEX is the proprietary brand for Go Outdoors and Blacks and other. JD Sports, I think, is the umbrella company that owns all of these these camping stores underneath them, and they sell the OEX stuff. But the Vango Banshee now is not available from Vango itself. It is a Go Outdoors exclusive, basically. I've seen them at Blacks and other places. So again, it's JD Sports. So I don't suppose that helps that it's an exclusive thing where the Banshee is competing with the Fox One, and the Banshee is twice the price of the Fox One. So I think Vango took their eye off the ball with that one a little bit. When you look at the Banshee and the Fox side by side, the Banshee is a nicer tent. The materials feel a little bit better, it's better finished, and it's inner and outer pitch at the same time, which I think the Fox 1 and 2 is still, inner pitch first, which is, like I said, not ideal for UK conditions. I've also noticed that the bigger the wild camping genre's getting, there's a little bit more snobbery creeping in as well. I've noticed people before ask questions about the Banshee on some of the forums, and there's people already saying, you don't want that, that's rubbish, you need a Hilleberg, or you don't want that, you need an MSR. And this tent is perfectly fine in the right conditions. And there's a lot of people out there, including myself, that is buying equipment that is a much higher spec than they actually need. So you should think about, when you want to buy a tent, what you're going to use it for, what do you actually need. There's a massive difference between pitching a tent on a little hill or in a woodland than there is in Everest or up in the Alps. So you just think about what you're going to be using your kit for. Back in the day, Vango tents were made in their little factory in Scotland, a place called Govan, I think, which is how they got the name. Vango is just an anagram of the town in Scotland. But in more recent times, with the mass production and things like that, pretty much all of these tents are made in China now, and there's a massive market of new brands coming from China as well. So you've got your Nature Hikes, you've got 3F UL Gear, TFS tents now seem to be doing the rounds, and some of these manufacturers can make equal or even better quality tents sometimes for less money. And there is sort of a nostalgia thing about buying British. So you're buying from a British company, Vango, although is that a British company now? I don't know. That is owned by AMG Group, I think. I don't know where their origins lie. But you're buying from historically a British company. Same with Terra Nova, yet they are manufacturing their tents overseas because they can't afford to do it here in the UK. So if you're buying a Chinese tent anyway, maybe you might want to buy a Nature Hike or a 3F UL gear. It's a shame that all these brands like Vango or Terra Nova, Carrymore, British brands that have sort of lost their heritage a little bit. Everything's got to be cheaper now, and to do that you've got to produce it overseas. Let's have a little look inside the tent and let me see if I can convince you that we all need to be buying the Vango Banshee again. Look at the beehive construction of that ripstop nylon. I actually think this is still a really good looking tent. These would have to be replaced nowadays with Dyneema, wouldn't they? And for 2012, all of the little bungees and stuff are still going strong. It's not very big inside though. Let's get that in there. I do like the orange. Smallish vestibule. See if I can sit down inside it. Could just about fit in it in my chair, but if I had one of these thicker sleeping pads nowadays, I'd struggle a little bit. It's quite a bit lower at the foot end, and if you're 6 foot tall, I don't think you're getting in here unless you sleep scrunched up a bit. It's not bad though, is it? I read something in an article from a few years back saying that Vango's got around 35% of the UK market share when it comes to tents. Now, that is not what I'm seeing in the campsites and the fells when it comes to backpacking tents, that's for sure. Maybe the things like family tents, I don't know how many of those they do. Awnings and stuff for caravans, I know they do those as well. But when you look on their website, when it comes to backpacking tents anyway, there are a lot of them that are entry level. So things like the Vango Soul it's got fiberglass poles, but it's about £50-60. It's cheap as chips. A lot of them are probably being used for festivals and things like that. Although they have got some, I think the F10 series. There's a Nexus, I think, which is a really good looking tent. These are still proper higher end backpacking tents, so I've not tried any of those yet. Maybe Alan, if you're watching, you said I could borrow yours, didn't you? So I might steal that from you for a little while and just compare some of the newer Vango stuff to this one from 2012. I'd like to think that tents like the Banshee are going to be modern classics, a bit like the Ford Escort XR3i, be much sought after. Next year the Banshee is going to be 20 years old, and hopefully they'll still be going strong. I'm going to have to use this tent a little bit more often, and I would love to see Vango make a little bit of a comeback and compete a bit more with some of these brands like your Nature Hike and 3FUL Gear. I think the problem with those is they sort of steal technology and designs a little bit, and I don't know if Vango do that. I know that they've got their TBS system, so the Force 10 tents are based on a triangular structure which is really strong in some of the worst conditions. And even with these kind of tents, they've got TBS stands for tension band system, I think it is, which goes from a peg out point to a point in the top of the tent and then back down to another one. So it still creates that strong triangle just using tension bands. So you can still have this extra space here on the tent, but having the stability with the triangular structure in the middle. You don't need that on there all the time. It's just when it gets really windy, you just put the tension bands on, and it's supposed to make a huge difference. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe and comment on this video, but feel free to comment if you wish to. But if you've ever seen a Vango Banshee on a campsite or in the fells, hit the thumbs up button. If you've owned a Vango Banshee, hit the thumbs up button 3 times. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.